Hey, Read Through the Word. Today is March 25th, and we are at the point in the book of Joshua. You're like, we're not done with the book of Joshua. No, there's going to be a major shift right here. So, in the book of Joshua, is about Joshua leading the nation. Or remember, I wasn't with you that day when you read that. But when they enter into the Jordan River, cross the Jordan River, and step onto dry land, and it says the nation. We've talked about this before. The first time that the Israel is called a nation. So now they're the nation. As the nation of Israel is driving out the inhabitants, taking the land. That's what the whole book has been about to this point. And now we're going to see it change with your reading, starting starting right at this point in chapter 11. Once you start into chapter 12, it really is telling you who all has fought and the land that the people are now going to go in and settle. So that they took the land up, divided it among the 12 tribes, and then go back and settle the land. And that's the next portion of the book of Joshua. And so we are looking at Joshua 11:23. I'm recording this late at night after school, and I cannot see. So if I keep going like this, I'm trying to see. So Joshua took control of the entire land, just as the Lord had instructed Moses. He gave it to the people of Israel as their special possession, dividing the land among the tribes. So the land finally had rest from war. And so that's where we are right now. They're done fighting their battles. Okay, see, I wore my shirt. This is how I fight my battles, the Holy Bible. So I wore my shirt in honor of victory. So today's lesson is called Victory. But they have taken the land. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of we'll talk about a couple of things, but then I want to show you a few things about Joshua and Jesus. So that's what we're going to look at today. And so as we looked, and I told you before when we started this book, that this was going to be hard because we read this through a different lens, and we don't understand some things, and it becomes challenging for a modern reader. And we envision that God is asking his people to wipe out entire nations of men, women, and children. And it's the idolatry that's the problem. It's the gods. That's what's happening. And God is asking his people to get the influence of the little g gods out of the area before they come in and settle. And so they have, at this point, gone through and fought. And now they're going to go in and settle the land. But we want to have a clearer picture of some things going on here. So let's talk a little Hebrew Greek thing here. Old Testament written in Hebrew, we know that. New Testament written in Greek. So words are Greek. There's some Aramaic in there. And Old Testament has some Aramaic in, where is that? No, it's not Aramaic. It's in, hold on. I'll think about that for a second. It'll come back to me in just a minute. I always think there's certain things that my bad concussion the other year knocked out of my head. And I don't realize they're gone till I try to say it. So it'll come back to me. But if we remember that the point of the Bible is not to answer every question we will ever have. The story is God's story about his plan, his mission to rescue, restore his rebellious creation and bring humanity back to himself through Jesus. That's the story of the Bible. And if we understand some of this, so the whole Hebrew Greek thing. Now, Hebrew, Joshua's name means Yahweh saves. Joshua would have been said Yeshua. The Greek translation in the New Testament of that is Jesus. And so same name there. It's the same name. Not the same person, same name. Because it means Yahweh saves. If we were looking at the only idea about we understood God was when we look in the book of Joshua, which is what modern people say about there's an Old Testament God and a New Testament God. Not true. Same God. So if we look at this story or account of the taking of the land, you might think that that God is like violent. Like this is a violent conquest. So if that was God's leading attribute, when Jesus, God incarnate, comes in New Testament, he would have been like that. But that's not a correct reading of Old Testament scripture. Jesus came, we would think, Jesus came to set right things by blood, by his own blood. That's why it's important that he tells us Isaiah tells us he's going to be the Prince of Peace, and that when Luke tells us the angels come, that says that about peace. And so get that idea that this is the same God incarnate. But if we understand that God himself in flesh suffered violence, so violence might be ended forever as the Prince of Peace. So, just like Joshua is going through the land, driving out evil, that's what we're going to see in New Testament. Jesus coming in to drive evil out of his creation. But Jesus' weapons are wisdom, love, and sacrifice. In the book of Joshua, God is triumphant in Canaan despite death and violence of battle. And that in Jesus, God triumphed over death itself because of the violence he endured. Joshua brings victory at the expense of his enemy's blood. Jesus brought victory for his enemies through his own blood. Of this, it is by no mistake that we're dealing with these parallels that God allows us to see the more and more we read scripture. So the conquest of this part of the book of Joshua is the conquest. So the conquest is not like the Old Testament angry God in New Testament. What we see is that Joshua points to Jesus, the true conqueror. He is the king whose reign ushers in an eternal kingdom of peace for all creation, more fully than Joshua's battles against evil ever could. That we're given so many glimpses of things throughout the Old Testament that will foreshadow Jesus. And that it can take us, this is one of the many great things about reading Scripture, in that it can take us so many times reading, and then each time we get one more piece and we understand a little bit more, we understand a little bit more. And I will always say that God knew we could not handle seeing it all at once. He is so majestic and so wonderful that He gives us time after time in the Word to see how wonderful, how loving, and how merciful He is. See you next time on Read Through the Word.